All right, good afternoon. Welcome to Northwestern Oklahoma State University's Video Get Started Lecture Series. Today we are joined by illustrator Evan Bijou, based in upstate New York. Thank you for joining us, Evan. Evan has his Bachelor of Science from Clarkson University, and he has his Master of Fine Arts in Illustration from Syracuse University. And today he is going to show us some of his work, as well as a demo of illustration techniques with my class today. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me.
All right, I'll let you take over here. Would you mind sharing your screen with us and kind of talk us through it with your work, your illustrations, your inspirations, so on?
Of course. Again, thank you all for having me. This is very exciting for me, and I'm happy to be given the talk. So here, we'll switch over, and I'll show you some of my work. There. And so I guess I'll just start back at Clarkson. When I was at Clarkson University, I was a digital arts and sciences major, and I received my bachelor's in science in that. But my concentration was character modeling and 3D modeling, specifically in ZBrush. And so what I have here is kind of an example of the work that I would be doing, working with characters, creating mock-ups and things. So this is a 3D sculpture that has some composites on it. It's just like some add-ins. And this is started from just a sphere that's pulled and extruded and then detailed until I kind of get the shape that I really want. And then up here I have kind of an example of what happens after I remesh it. It gives like concentric circles around the eyes and the mouth, and basically all that does is it sets the model up to be rigged by riggers and then animated. And so that would be a pipeline process you would see for characters in games or characters in movies. That's kind of that was my specialty while I was at Clarkson. Let me see.
Great. How did you come up with the particular concept design of this character?
Say that one more time.
How did you come up with this specific character design and this, the outfit and whatnot? What was your inspiration
this specific
that?
Character, how did I come up with him?
Mm-hmm.
Normally where I'll start is I'll just start in my sketchbook and I just start sketching, and sometimes ideas they'll take a form or a shape that I didn't know that they would, and so this kind of just started off as me trying to create almost like an amphibian sort of human hybrid crossover. And so I started to just model the head, and then as I went along I thought, well, it would be kind of cool to add like these sort of like these barometers or like these electrical signal patches or conduits or whatever to kind of give this character almost like a high-tech feel, but also like an armored feel. And so it's just it's really just like a lot of plug and play, a lot of just variants and testing out different ideas. And so this guy just kind of just came out of nowhere, really. I didn't have any solid idea when I started to make him.
Okay, so it was quite an intuitive process, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's I mean, if you have a really like a really good concept of what you want to go for, that helps because it'll reduce the amount of time that you're working in the program. But this was more just for fun, and I just kind of let the idea kind of go where it wanted to. So I like creating monsters and stuff like that too. I should probably have more humans on deck to show, but this is one of the better models that I have to show right now. But I've done other work in 3D too. Like this is an example of a piece that is started in 2D. Literally, all it is a silhouette. You have like just this black image on a white background, and you can bring it into ZBrush. And what I did was I extruded it and decimated it so that the number of faces was manageable. And I passed off the file in a .stl form to one of my old professors, who then printed it out on his desktop 3D printer. So this is actually like a real it's a 3D model that's gone from just a 2D plane to a 3D model, and we printed it and we painted it gold. So Star Trek communicator. Because I love Star Trek. I'm a huge Star Trek fan.
Does your love for sci-fi feed into your character designs and your other illustrations and so on?
Does my science background key into my art?
Your interest in sci-fi, does that feed into your overall illustration style?
Yes. My love for science is It runs very deep, and so it usually finds its way into my work, as you can see with like the technology on the fish guy, this sort of thing. I like that sci-fi or science sort of feel in my work. I do like doing fantasy stuff too, and sometimes that's where I like to mix those two different genres. Like this, for example. So this wouldn't be really a science-y take on art, but this is it's just a little character study. It was done quickly. You can see kind of like these scratches and scrapes around the outside. It was actually straight out of my sketchbook and just brought into Photoshop and colored with a multiply blend layer, and that's all it is. So I like really just kind of giving just these one-off characters, these sort of singular characters that are in my sketchbook, kind of like their own perspective or their own ideas, and it helps me kind of like flesh out characters to add to stories and things like that. So this is just like a fun piece of he's kind of like, I don't know if he's an alien or if he's like an elf. He could be maybe a little bit of both, but he's just kind of having a drink and musing about something. I don't really know, but he'll probably end up in one of my stories down the way.
Great.
Other stuff is a little less, I want to say a little more concept-driven rather than literal. So the last character you would have maybe would be in a scene. This is more of something that you would, I don't know, see just standing by itself, just like a standalone piece. I wanted to do a color test, and this model is actually inspired by one of Rolf Armstrong's models. He was a pinup artist. An illustrator, and he used to do a lot of wartime pinups and things like that. So this was kind of my take on that. I wanted to do just a nice color test and come up with something that was a little more concept driven, and try to take away information from the model itself to kind of give the mind something to work with, like down here where her feet disappear, or where her hand kind of like coincides with the anchor. It almost makes the anchor look transparent. So this was just like almost like a material and color test. Mainly I work on comics, or specifically one comic series that I'm working on right now is it's called Late Earth, and this is from the first issues, the 0 issue, and it's basically just like a scene between two characters that I've come up with, and they setting the exposition a little bit, and there's some like subversive joking going on here, kind of speaking about like he says where we are now is of little instance, canonically speaking, which basically says that this comic is in and of itself not necessarily completely related to everything that happens, and it just is of little incidents. And so they're just kind of joking really about the comic itself, but it weaves into the conversation that is at hand. So I really like to take writing, I like to put that into my work, and really gives people something to reread. I want someone to get to the end of the comic and kind of wonder what they just read, so have them go back and read it again.
Okay. How did you come up with the color schemes in this particular comic?
It's interesting that you should ask that. It was basically a review session where we would put our work up on the wall, and we would talk about what worked and what didn't, and it was the first time that I had all of the pages printed out and ready to stick next to each other. And so I put them all up on the wall in the way they would kind of be viewed, and the first thing that was really apparent about it was that it was all brown and red, and it had like just a dinginess to it that when we looked at it on the wall, it didn't look appetizing. It looked kind of like there needs to be more color information here. And so what I did was I took a note from Pixar. They showed us when we took a trip to LA to visit some production studios and stuff like that. And what we were seeing is Pixar and DreamWorks and Sony and these places, what they would do is they would basically put the story's thumbnails out, and then they would give it's almost like the color dynamic across the entire range of the animation itself. And so the spots that are more intense would get red. The spots that were more lonesome or sorrowful would be blue. And so I kind of took that sort of that idea, and I took all of my comic pages, I set them up next to each other one by one, and I just took a gradient in Photoshop and dragged it from one end of the comic to the other. And so initially the comic starts and it's kind of like a yellowish, orangish, and by the end of it, it's really dark red and green. But each page has its own sub gradient that goes to it. So the color scheme is actually weaved back on top of it. It's just blending layers. I've used a gradient that will run from either here to here or down here or specific panels, and then just run green to orange, and just put it on a soft light blend. And then that's where the color scheme is actually coming from. It's coming from specific gradients that are chosen for each page based on the feeling of that page.
Great.
And I'm glad that we actually had a chance to look at it on the wall, because it looked gross at first. It wasn't very pretty. So that's that.
Great. So with this piece, it seems like a huge contrast to your current style as opposed to your previous style, which is a lot more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk about how you jump from realism to your current personal style or aesthetics?
Yeah. This painting kind of exhibits like the sort of realism that I wanted to go for when I was still an undergrad. I was like, if you can render an image, to the T, then you're golden. But that doesn't necessarily make a concept. Like, this is great for, if I wanted to do like a still life or a painting or something like that. There's a market for that, but there's also the creative market that comes with coming up with your own sort of characters and styles. And so I guess initially I wanted to do work like this, and this is actually a piece that came out of undergrad. It's a speed test. It took me about, I think, an hour and a half, and I just took an image of a tomato. I put it down here on the side of the screen, and I just kind of looked at it and painted exactly what I saw. So it's more of just like a, I don't know, to me it can be kind of robotic at times to just kind of like paint exactly what you see. So I think why I've gone in the direction that I've gone is because I'm interested in creating the things that I can't see. I can see them in my head, but I can't definitely see them, and so I'll take it upon myself to actually render those things for others to see. This is an example of like a realism painting. This would be more impressionistic. These swatches that you're seeing, these blots, are actually made from a brush that was created in Photoshop. And so at first these clouds started out kind of chunky and just kind of general, and it had a look to it then that was still appealing, but I wanted to really eke out like the texture in this. And so this is a painting that has had several hours just poured into it, and it's been liquefied, and it's had just adjustments made to it over and over and over again to get sort of like this fiery brimming sort of look to it. Also be an example of like the difference between the realistic painting that I was shooting for, and then moving more in towards this sort of impressionistic or fantasy sort of paintings that I otherwise can't see. My work is all over the place. This was a mobile game that I had done the assets for. As a friend and I, we wanted to make games, and so he kind of gave me the concept, and we decided we were going to make this little scroller. And what he did was he asked me for backgrounds. He asked me for different mindsets, the ship itself, the subs, and the different animations that would go into it. So we kind of like, I put the assets together and I handed it off to him, and we actually came up with a game. And so we kind of hope to release more of that in the future. You had raised a point last time when you saw this, that you said that you really enjoyed the it's almost like the simplicity of the designs that I chose for the mines, and the reason for that was because the screen itself is so small that you don't need a whole lot of detail to actually to make something that looks decent. So
right.
This was,
I felt that this was pretty strong in its minimalist design, and the very small amount of color palettes, and the gradients are pretty effective in both water and sky. So I found it quite effective. So you're saying that this game is available on iOS already?
The game is actually on iPhone, I believe, and I would have to get the link from him as to where it is. But the game only went so far. We kind of stopped with it because we didn't know where else to go with our game modes or exactly what to do uh, as far as like how to make the game, you know, not just just this one single speed, one single sort of difficulty. So that's kind of where it halted at. Um, this was just splash art for a game. It was a concept for a game that we had that has yet to come up off the ground, but it was going to basically tie live scientific data into a game that would essentially affect the way the players would interact or what they would be able to explore. So that was the concept for that. We kind of fleshed it out a little bit, and it's still kind of in the cutting room mode right now. I'm still hashing out ideas for it.
Okay.
But this was an excuse for me to paint a galaxy, and so that's what I was really pumped to do that.
Right.
Well, this is the same. Well, this is the same ship that you see right here. I actually took this ship and superimposed it. This was a design that is for a ship that I intended on designing in ZBrush. I was taking a class called Trek class at one point. I really got into the different designs of the ships that were in the show, and so I really wanted to make my own sort of star cruiser that could be piloted by a crew. So this was the idea that I came up with. Started as a pencil sketch, then did a black and white version of it, and then finally kind of gave it this sort of black and gold color scheme. Just an example of kind of just like concept art, fleshing out your ideas. Other stuff is a little more cartoony. This was just, I took a Copic marker, it's a gray Copic marker, and just did some really rudimentary squiggles on the page with the chisel tip, and it kind of came out with this sort of design that had depth to it, and I could almost see structures in it. So what I did was I went around the outside of it with a pencil, and then I just kept kind of going in and finding like the little nuances or whatever, and it turned out to almost look like almost like a little floating town or floating city. It's like canopy up here. And so I called this piece Skybird, and this was just something it was a very simple test. I wanted to kind of get the natural shape of the marker and the tones that were coming out as a result of going over it several times to just kind of create this sort of little design. So this is a good way to create things that aren't necessarily there either. You make your marks in there. The shapes exist. They're in there somewhere, but you have to go in with other tools to kind of find those things and eke them out.
Okay.
Other stuff. This is a Photoshop piece that I did. My mother is a painter, and so she paints beautiful scenes, landscapes, mountains, clouds, and she has these paintings hanging in the living room, and I was looking at one of them one day, and I really wanted to try to kind of capture that sort of just the quickness or the livelihood of the strokes that she was using. I was just very inspired by that, and so I came up to my room and I plunked down and I hashed out this sort of scene, and it's all paint. It's all just digital painting, and if you look really close, this is the same brush that was used. It's a little pixelated, but it's the same brush that I used to make that starship scene. That's the ship is kind of sitting in the clouds. This is the same brush, and this is actually one of the examples that I'm going to give you guys today. I'll show you how to make these clouds super quick, and once I figured out how to do it, it's actually kind of one of those cathartic things. You just sit down and repeat it over and over again. It's a lot of fun. So I don't know if anybody is noticing, but you'll see sort of like these sort of characters that are reoccurring that'll kind of pop back up. The idea of my comic is kind of pervasive to most of my art, and so what I try to do is if I create a piece, I try to imagine, how that piece fits into that world. And so this would be a world that you would find in the comic book. It's just a mountain range. One of the characters is kind of from the high mountains, and so you have this sort of narrative of him kind of coming down the mountain, following this path, and just sort of walking to his destination. I try to like insert a little bit of a story into most of the stuff that I do, whether it be conceptual or literal.
Great.
more backgrounds. I worked in Flash animation. I really enjoy like cartoons. I used to go to Newgrounds.com all the time when I was a kid, and I would watch all the Flash animations. That was really what kind of inspired me to go to Clarkson and to kind of pursue that sort of digital arts degree. And this was made while I was in grad school. This was designed to be a background again for the world that I was conceiving for the comic book. So this location is actually called Riftwood Forest, and it's like a maze. If you go in, if anybody's ever played like Legend of Zelda, you have like the Lost Woods. This is kind of almost my take on that. So you have like this sort of little post over here. It's got directions and then this insignia over here. So you're not too sure, necessarily where to go when you get in there, but this might get you where you're going. So this is kind of again inserting that sort of little storyline into this scene. Stop me if I'm going too fast, by the way.
I think you're doing just fine.
Okay, cool. I've done product design. While I was in grad school, I was trying to run, trying is a keyword, to run an indie label with my friends. So we would put on shows or musical concerts and go to open mics, and it was just like we were a group of musicians, and we were blanketed under this name, Renaissance Academy Records. And so what I was doing was designing shirts for us to wear and designing different posters for events. And this was kind of like the main logo that I was using for a lot of different things, for letterheads, for return address labels, things like that. But what's really interesting about this logo is that someone actually, I think, tried to steal it from me at one point. Which is a very weird story. I got a message from someone from Russia. Their name was in Cyrillic, and they spoke very broken English. But the gist of the conversation was, he said that he wanted to ask me about my logo, and I said, what did you want to know? And he's like, oh well, I created this years ago, and he's like, I wanted to ask for your permission to use it. But it was all in like broken English, so to me I don't know if this person was saying that he wanted to use it for something or said that he created it, but it was very, very confusing to me to be like, I made this in a class for one of my professors back in 2009, and I was messaged over this like 2 years ago, and so I thought that was very, very bizarre. It was very weird, and so what I did was I turned around and I actually copyrighted the image. I went through the process to, get the rights to this to make sure that there was no contest or there was nothing happening with that. But that's one of my weirder stories that I will share with you. I had someone trying to, I think, assume the creative control over this logo, and I turned around and I said, no, this is not. I stopped talking to that person. I was like, I don't know where this is going. But
do you want to talk a little?
Oh, go ahead.
Talk a little bit more about copyright issues, but as far as like creating images and logos and things like that. Like, what is like is there like a rule of thumb as to how much or how you should make an image to make it your own and things like that, or what do you know about copyrights as far as like creative, usage?
Okay, that's a really good question, and it's actually something that I've had to deal with, just like with the story that I just told you. As far as your copyright goes, if you were an artist, basically the way copyright law works is they say if you are an artist and you create a piece of work, as soon as you create it, it's copyrighted. That's kind of the general held belief of what copyright is. If you create something, it's entirely yours. It belongs to you. No contest immediately. The hard part is providing documentation that it has actually happened, and so you can do things to kind of cement what is yours creatively without paying money. You can pay literally what you can do is you can take an image of something, whatever you've created, and you can send that image in $30 in like an application form to there's an actual government website for copyrighting your work, and then they'll copyright it and it goes into the Library of Congress and it's official. There's no contest there. But if you don't feel like spending $30 or you don't believe that you're going to need that sort of protection, but you still want to protect your work, something as simple as your signature with a little copyright symbol and the year, that works. Something like creating a piece of work, copying it, printing it, and then mailing it to yourself and never opening it, that's a way to do it. And if you have a digital file, there is going to be a timestamp on that file when it's created. And so if you have the base file, which is your .psd, which is your Photoshop file, or you have your Illustrator file, that these images are, you have the actual existing raw version of it, that's also going to prove that it's your work. So it's really a matter of, if people are going to try to rip you off, they're going to steal your work outright anyway, and it's a matter of you actually finding them stealing it, because until then it just kind of goes under the radar undetected. So keeping vigil is good, but if someone comes out of the woodwork and is trying to say that your work is theirs and you know that it's not, it's probably not going to be that difficult for you to disprove that person. So just take weirdness like that, I guess, with a grain of salt. But if someone's like selling T-shirts with your image on it and they're making millions of dollars and you're having a hard time paying your bills, then it's a problem. So then you would have recourse. But that's what I know of copyright law in the time that I've been working as a freelance illustrator. Oh, good question. That was a really good question.
Well, thanks for sharing your input.
Like I said, more product design. Late Earth is the title of my band. It is also the title of the comic book that I create. And what I've done here is we had a Kickstarter project that was geared at sort of getting a financial base to have the comics printed. One of the rewards was a T-shirt, and so I put up a design for a T-shirt and kind of showed it around to my bandmates and asked them what they thought, and we had settled on this one. And so now this top left image is the one that's actually going to get printed on to be put on shirts. And so that's another example of just kind of doing more work for the comic, the music, and then just doing product design for that.
Great.
Portraiture. This is my bassist. Her name is Natalie, and I really have started to kind of go back towards that realism a little bit. This was done over the course of the last year and a half, I'd say. And I had never really sat down and just straight up painted somebody the way that they look, detailed as much as I could do it. And so this was kind of one of my first attempts at that. And I found that I really, really enjoy portraiture, and I could see myself doing this in the future more often. But so this is our bassist. She's in Late Earth. She plays an LTD 5-string, and she's cool. She's a good friend. Another portrait example is I was showing this to Yoshi at one point. This is the same professor that I had been doing the 3D printing with. I designed the ship for him, and so he's the Star Trek professor. His name is Anthony Rutola, and he is currently teaching not a Star Trek class at Syracuse University, but a Doctor Who class that he's doing it almost completely online. He has 200 students that will actually go and take his class on a Monday, but outside of that, there are 3,000 students that are watching him give his lectures. And so he's doing some pretty interesting stuff right now. This is a mantle portrait that I'm actually printing for him. I'm going to print it out, put it on Masonite, and then put a big gold frame around it. So this is the intermediate version of it. This is where I'm at with it right now. And so he's gonna have his. I mean, we went all out with this one. He's got his little Star Trek communicator pips right here, and I'll put a TARDIS in the background. Just a bunch of cool stuff. So this is another example of some of the work that I'm getting as a freelance illustrator.
Great.
Poster design. The way I've kind of set it up is my band is asked to do a show if there's some event that's going on and we're asked to play music. I usually will put up the deal if my band gets to play, we'll do the poster for free. So that's a good way to move the illustration around. It's a good way to actually get shows. So it's Late Earth. we played at a Fusion Room in Syracuse at one point, and then they later shut down shortly after that. The venue wasn't run super well, and I had a feeling something was going to happen because we still didn't know who the other bands were that were going to play, and so I left this large blank space over here on the side. We've given enough concerts to the point where I know that something is gonna go wrong, like last minute something is gonna happen where either a band drops or we get a new band on or the venue changes or the date or whatever. And so what I started to do was I started to preemptively plan for people to screw us over by including a lot of empty space on my posters so that when the final version would come around we would have space for any sort of info changes. We just put it right on there. So a little bit of design and a little bit of skepticism kind of go a long way when it comes to poster design. And this is the last one that I'll show you. This is just kind of like a take on the "I Want You" poster. It was done by Montgomery flag for World War II. So Uncle Sam was just kind of like everybody knows that image, and so I kind of wanted to do something a little more modern on that. This is kind of like how I feel sometimes, just like the way the world is around us. I think that there should be more of an emphasis on people like really embracing creativity, embracing like progress rather than embracing more brutal policies. So this is kind of my commentary on that. My dad thinks it'll make me enemies. I don't know. I think it's fairly tame for a lot of the stuff that's out there. So, but this is sort of my satire. This is a satirist take. And that's my body of work that I have to show for you guys. If there's any questions, I can answer questions.
Okay. Well, you guys have any questions for Evan so far?
Is this all Photoshop? I'm not really familiar with as many programs there are.
Yes, a lot of this is.
Sorry, go ahead.
Normally, what I'll do is I'll start. I can just turn my thing down. Normally what I'll do is I'll start with a pencil sketch and then I just work it out in Photoshop. The longer it stays in Photoshop, the more altered it's going to look, or the less like a sketch it's going to look. Like this would be an example of something that's almost directly taken from a sketch and just has a little bit of paint put over the top of it. It's not much. Here's an example that is straight from a sketch to a more rendered Photoshop version. So yes, a lot of what you're seeing is the final versions of things are rendered in Photoshop. The initial things are usually done as a sketch.
Okay. Anybody else? Right, on paper.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you be willing to demo something for us?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. So I have Photoshop open right here. And what I did say was I was going to show you guys how to do those clouds. What I did to make those was I actually constructed my own brush, and I could run you through Photoshop and teach you how to make brushes. It's in here in define brush preset. So any grayscale image you have can be turned into a brush, and depending on how dark it is how thick or saturated those lines are going to be. So what I did was I took a hexagon, and I actually, this is what it looks like. I'll bring it up. You can see I took a hexagon, and I actually put a gradient in the center of it that spins counterclockwise, and it actually starts It starts at 0 and ends at 100%. So when it kind of wheels around itself, it looks like I'm in white right now. It looks like this. And so it's a geometric shape, but it has that gradient to it. And it has a very interesting effect when you layer it over the top of itself. It starts to almost diamondize. It looks like it's got a lot of refraction going on in it. And so that is actually really useful for creating things like clouds or ice or things like that, because they're full of water vapor. They're full of these crystals that kind of reflect light. And so when you step really far away from something like this, you don't end up noticing like how pixelated or grainy it looks. It actually looks like it blends directly into the background. So what I'll do is, if I wanted to make a sky scene, I'll bring it out a little bit, a gradient, and I'll go up here. I will define it with, we'll say, we'll do like a nice pale blue. We'll go to like that. So I'll just drag it from end to end, get something kind of like this. Now the sun would probably be down here. But what I then do is I'll take a lighter version of this kind of fill light and put my brush back on. Then I'll go over here to, these are my brush dynamics. So we have shape dynamics and scattering. If I turn scattering off, it's just going to kind of make it look like a regular line. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's definitely, it's good for what you need it for. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to add scattering to it, which causes it to not follow any direct linear path. So it's going to have a lot of variance in it as you drag along. So what this is good for is if you want to make clouds, you just drag on the thing, and you'll start to see the base of what clouds actually look like. And so if I were to like zoom way out from this, I mean that could be, those could be clouds all on their own. And so if I zoom in real close, fill it in a little bit more. You can turn, come in, and you can grab these colors that are over here on the side and start to kind of bring them back in. And what that ends up doing is it ends up adding like almost caves and peaks to the outside of the clouds. It's like they have depth to them. And this is the same technique that I used on that starship piece. The same sort of technique that went into the mountains. It's really all it is. It's just that layering, that systematic layering of different tones and different colors to bring out exactly what you're looking for. I like to go back in and I like to take away kind of like those really harsh edges. It breaks it up. Bring the opacity down. Here. And so you can see kind of like the general direction that it's going. And then it's just a matter of spending hours on top of it, just kind of like getting that to where you want it to be.
Okay.
And so that's just kind of like an example of the painting approach that I'll take to making natural forms. But one of the most useful things I've ever learned is actually in the realm of illustration. This is really, really good for cartooning. And so what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you how to make a lot of different faces for characters that you can repeat quickly and easily. And so I will change my brush. Something. Bring this up. this down, get a nice gray, and then this is how I'm going to show you basically my example for how I warm up when I'm going to start drawing a lot of characters, or when I'm going to start on a new comic book page or something like that. I usually like to get my chops back up, and so I'll start with pages of take scattering down. I usually start with a page, and I'll do this. I just go along the page, add a bunch of circles. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing a lot of small head studies. And this is really good for capturing emotion, it's really good for capturing action, and for getting your character's facial structures down and tight so that you can repeat it over and over again. And so on and so forth. Long you want to do that. But what I'll normally do is then once I have all my, these are my heads, right here, so I'm going to start. I normally go in and I define where the nose is going to be. And so a nose is just basically the shadow underneath the nose is what your brain sees and classifies a human face. It's my explanation for this is it's biology. Your brain is designed to see the shapes on another human's face and readily. And so that's how you know who your friend is from across a football field when they're just walking under sunlight, is because they have a special shape to their face that makes them them. Your brain has registered. And so you go through, you add all your noses, you'll add your eyes, and it's all just very, very like small, little tiny marks. Nothing. I mean, even you don't even need to necessarily be on this guy's face is crooked, but it still has a weight to it. It still feels kind of real. And so that's kind of like the beauty of cartoon. You don't really have to worry about if something is truly on or truly proportioned. It's when you get into realism that becomes more of a problem for people. So you go through, you put all your eyes in, and then you're going to do the shape of the mouth. So that could be anything you want. Frowns, something talking, like beaming, weird, split. Notice I'm also adding the shadow underneath the lower lip, and so that's part of that's one of the 5 or 6 shapes that your brain is always going to see on another person, is that shadow underneath the lip. It shows that there's a depth to the face rather than just like a flat mouth. That no one here has eyebrows, and so they all kind of have like this sort of stunned look on their face. But if they're going a little bit closer, can just start adding this is really adding the feeling. It's like if you want to make people look like they have empathy, kind of like cock your eyebrows like that, like this to me is when you're like really bored, you know, just he's not having a good day, excited, perplexed, angry. And so, again, just down the line, you can make them thick, you can make them really tiny. People also have ears, another thing. So don't forget the ears. A lot of people will draw heads and it's like, it doesn't look right. It's because, well, you can't hear anything. So get rid of that. And so anybody can do this. I mean, this is even just fun if you're bored. You know, like if you have something that you need to sit through, you can do this on any page with any pencil or pen. And it's a good way to come up with, you know, like real quick sketches, or to come up with real quick concepts. Like, I mean, hair is essentially all over the place. Like, you can do anything with hair that you want. You can make it like kind of formed. You can make it, you know, kind of just hanging down. guy's got maybe like a little Bart Simpson thing going on. Old guy.
Or he's good, right?
Are you just doing this like real quick, and then whatever facial expression comes out, that's how it is, or
Yeah.
are you purposely doing all of this?
I mean, I'm picking and choosing. Like I know that there's always gonna be. I mean, you can make any combination of a face that you want, and it's gonna look different depending on how you kind of inflect that face. So like, my eraser is not working properly. That's why my flow is on 22%. Back up. So like this face could be, let's just say, like the eyes and the nose are always going to be the same distance from each other because the human face is dynamic, but it's not that dynamic. Your eyeballs aren't going to travel around too much. So essentially, the distance between your eyes and the distance from the nose, the size of the nose, those things aren't going to change. But everything else is pretty interchangeable. Like, I mean, if I wanted to make somebody happy, I would put back on my brush. I would make them not look like that, but I would make them smile. Or I could make them frown. Or I could make them look kind of moot. Or I can make them look suspicious. Even still, the eyebrows can change any way you want. So if you want to make them look wimpy, there's that. You want to make them look kind of like, what are you up to? Like one of those things. There's the bored look. There's eyes, eyebrows, like it's really just like that's what it is. You're varying those few things on someone's face. So if I wanted to really make any face, so long as the nose and the eyes are equidistant, they're always going to be that way, then you can do anything else that you want with the head, and it'll probably look okay. It's a matter of not being afraid to actually attempt to do those things. I don't know what this guy's got in his head, but he's got like a little pompadour. Got a Chun-Li over here as our character. Got bangs, whatever. Like this guy's wearing a hoodie. And so, I mean, if anybody out there is looking to do comics, if you're looking to do any sort of medium where your characters are going to be reoccurring and they're going to be repeating, this is a really, really good practice to have. And once you get quick at it, it becomes a lot less daunting to get your characters up off the ground. You don't have to like worry about them being, so completely detailed right off the bat that you get hung up on that. Like, really, when you are making if I wanted to make the same character but for an animation, his eyes would be the same way every time. I would make him talking or saying something, stopping, bringing up a point, getting irate, whatever. And then, so long as his the accessories or the addressments or whatever that are being put on this character are all the same, or normally, you're not going to have to worry about detracting too far from that character, because people will start to recognize things that are obviously going to remain consistent from scene to scene or from frame to frame. So like if a character has like ears or whatever and they sway around, like those things are going to change. But as far as your the composition of that, like what is remaining and what is changing, that's what's really going to be the difference between having characters that look completely different and having animation. So this would be 1, 2, 3. I could use these right now. I could turn around and put these in Flash and use them as my keyframes, and then add my audio animate between it, and then you have an animation. You have the base of an animation ready to go. So if you're interested in doing that sort of stuff, this is a very good exercise.
Well, on that note, my students have a poster design for the first assignment for travel. What kind of suggestions do you have for my students to get started on something like that for poster design?
A poster design for travel?
Right. So
okay.
to increase interest in travel to a town.
What I would say is, I mean, you guys are probably used to making thumbnails or fleshing out your work beforehand. So normally what I'll do is if I have like a specific task at hand, I'll usually take a page, I'll make like a bunch of little boxes, and then I will just kind of go in and I'll just make, it's weird to kind of advertise like, hey, just make stuff that doesn't make sense, like make marks that you don't really know if they make sense or not, but just try it. That's kind of where I go when I am trying to make landscapes, because there's a lot of natural marks that go into making landscapes that you would otherwise not consider, and so you have to allow that to, if this makes sense, you have to allow that to actually happen. And so if I wanted to make something like, to me this looks like it almost looks like a canyon. And so I would say, okay, there's like some more canyon stuff in the background, straight lines, maybe clouds or whatever. And then you get kind of like your general idea. Maybe there's like a path right here and bushes, or maybe it's like a highway. Like it's starting to look like maybe like Coyote Roadrunner sort of stuff, like that sort of, I don't know, that sort of setting. And so you just kind of hash your marks out and just kind of try to find like the outlines and things. There's some boulders here. Add trees. And then you say, okay, so that kind of looks, I mean, it's really loose, but it's a start. And so what I would do from there is I would probably just go in with color. I'll say, like, I want these rocks to look like almost kind of like orange, a little more on the reddish side, something kind of like that. And then you would just go in and literally just paint where you know that color is going to end up. I'm just going to add this here and there, rock up here. Okay. You get all your rocks painted in, whatever you say. Okay, so those are going to be the color of my rocks. My sky is going to be, let's give it like, make it a little bit lighter, a little bit less saturation than the rocks. So it should go over here, go through here. Okay. You start with your sky. Do your clouds are a little bit of a pink color. That sort of contrast. And then just go through, you block out your color. So like there are the clouds in the background. The canyons in the distance are obviously going to be a little bit colder. So I'll make them, just put them kind of down here. And really try to like fill out the whole image with color. It doesn't necessarily have to have lines. It doesn't need to be perfect. But having that color information is really, really good for kind of directing yourself to where you want to go. So you kind of come up with your concept and then try to find what's really good for more realistic stuff, for more coherent things, is to actually look at what those things look like. I know I kind of like preach like this is the sort of thing where you don't know what you're looking at. These are your exercises to kind of bring things out of nowhere. But down here is once you kind of get your idea, you want to say, well, I really want to know what like the rocks that look like this actually sit like. I want to know what the shadows on them actually look like. And so go in search of the images that you know are going to give you that information, and then pick and pull, and pick and choose like where you're gonna place your shadows. You don't necessarily have to look at exactly how the light and shadows hit something, but having a general idea of the way that they do is be good for your setting up your environment.
So one question that's a little bit separate from this is one thing I'm noticing in the way that you do your illustrations, that there's emphasis on speed. Could you talk more about how you, what you do to practice speed and then to get your compositions in without overthinking your illustrations?
Yeah, speed. I love music. Music is a very, very big help when it comes to either to coming up with a concept or to even having the energy to do that. And so one of the things that I do like to practice is if I hear a song that has like it's got really good energy to it, or it has like a really driving beat, and I'm feeling it, what I'll do is I'll put that music on, and then I'll try to actually make marks and curves to that beat or to that song. And depending on what the song is, you know, I could come up with something entirely different based on the liveliness of it. So, say taking like I love ska. Ska is like one of my favorite types of music. I like Street Light Mansion. So if I put on one of their songs, like Somewhere in Between, that has like very like, booming like a trumpet line, it would I would go through and almost like at all like the solos, depending on where all the notes hit, that's where I'll change my direction. Or that's where I'll change kind of like the marks that I'm making. I don't know, I would put music on, but I wouldn't want it to feedback. But as far as just like making speed without music, like it's really just like letting your hand just whip around, letting it kind of like feel where it wants to go, and then you can make things out of that. Like you can find the forms that are in that. So just kind of maybe I'll block this out and see, you know, what comes. Something like that. So like and then I kind of try to imagine what I'm seeing, so I can kind of see a little bit like right here. Maybe these are some rocks, you know, over here on the side, and you know maybe the rocks are near like a little kind of like meandering river. The river kind of goes back. And so to kind of get like an idea of well, maybe the rivers are kind of like running from a mountain range in the back.
So it's about trusting intuition based on your
yeah.
those sketches.
Mm-hmm. It's really it's hard to train because that approach is going to come from within the person that is making those marks and or drawing or painting or whatever it is. That person is the one that's in charge of rendering this idea. So allowing a degree of freedom to yourself is, I think, essential. But it's something that's really mercurial, and it's really hard to teach that. You know, it's like, you know, what is the key to going fast? It's to go fast. Like it's to let your own natural movements speak in the scene that you're creating. And that's, I guess, kind of where my speed for creating things comes from, is because I've had it hammered into me not to be afraid of making those marks. Just make the marks, you know, put them down, move on to something else. And if it doesn't look right, you can always go back, you can go over it. So it's that assurance that I can go back and alter what I've created also is a nice blanket for moving quickly, because I don't have to worry about screwing it up, because it's already screwed up. It's just like a jumble.
So do you think this type of approach is pretty common with most illustrators, or is it just mostly just your personal thing?
I think that having speed is definitely something that is integral to being a successful freelance illustrator, because if you have a deadline, people want their stuff done quickly. And so I know that a lot of artists don't like that sort of working under pressure sort of thing. Art is supposed to be that sort of safe space for us where we create, you know, at our pace. But when it comes to being an illustrator, you're almost like a hired gun. You're the mercenary by which someone will get their artwork done. So they hire you to move quickly. That was kind of explained to me by illustrators, the professors that I was working with. So I think that some people will kind of express that sort of tendency, and others will not. But I recommend having some level of speed to your thumbnail process, or to your sort of building process initially, because that's where there's going to be a lot of marks that you don't otherwise go over or notice that are there if you move too slowly, or if your moves are too stagnant.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you, Evan. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate you demonstrating some of your techniques and showing your work to us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Evan.
Thank you guys very much. I don't know if you could hear my nervousness, but like, this is the first time I've done this. This has been a great experience for me. I appreciate this very much.
Yeah, this has been great. I think you had a lot to share with us, and it has been quite helpful. So, yeah, I really don't have anything else for you unless you guys have, like I said, ask questions. Otherwise, well, I will bid you goodbye. Thank you again. This has been Northwestern Oklahoma State University, and we were joined today by Evan Bujold. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.